Good evening and welcome to another thrilling episode of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host Lockefox and this is your show for the YC118.1 point release. We're going to start where we usually do with the show news real quick. First, I want to thank everyone who's tuned in live on YouTube and Twitch. We got about 30 people watching live, so thank you everybody. We're live usually on Fridays at 0300. That's Thursday night US time. Next week we're going to have a bit of a schedule change. We're bumping the show back from 0300 to 0100. I need to do the show earlier so I can get to bed early. I have some weekend plans that need me in bed early. So that's next week, should be at 0100. Be sure to be tuned in to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and the blog where we'll announce any other show changes there. If you want to chat with us off the air, the best place to do so is on the Tweet Fleet Slack. Information is down in the channel info below. Come join us at the Prosper channel where we talk about all of the market and tools information you could ever want to shake a stick at. Next, I want to thank all of our patrons. If you want to support the show directly, we're very specifically do not enable ads on any of the content, and it's our patrons that keep this show on the air, keep us flying. And I want to thank all of our patrons so very much for your support. It really does keep the lights on, keeps the show running. I'm hoping to start talking about some swag in February, thanks to that, so you guys can have at least some amount of Prosper swag. I'll have more information once I can get those balls actually moving. Lastly, I want to go ahead and point to the blog at eveprosper.com where we've put out two pieces in the last week where we, talk about if you wanted to run for CSM, the sort of things you need to think about, or at least that I believe you need to think about to be a good candidate and to avoid some of the pitfalls that a lot of candidates are going to end up falling into. And two, we finally got the Market Maker interview released from Charlinda Akateru. So if you ever were at all interested in drugs or are interested at all in heavy, high-risk industry, that is going to be definitely the show to tune into. Also, be sure to check out our 2015 review of the EVE economy and the forecast review for PLEX that I released a couple of weeks ago, but wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. With that, let's go ahead and move on to the news. First big news is that the YC118.1 patch is out, and CCP, if you're listening, please give us back named releases. This YC year dot number thing, I freaking hate it. Like, Frostline is a great name, or Bloody Harvest was a great name. And since you don't have an event going on along with it, but you still have content releasing, I really hate the name. So please go back to naming these things. This point naming system is dumb. Next, the next big piece of news is CSM 11 is finally opening. CCP Lilu put out a dev blog about the details on how to get running and what the schedule is and everything that candidates need to know and voters need to know. If you guys know me from the last year, I love CSM season, and I suggest that everybody go and subscribe right now to CSM Watch. They're going to be contacting every candidate they possibly can to get interviews, so you can know every candidate. And those guys are working their butts off. The interviews just opened last night, and information on how to get in touch with them will be in the links below. Last, and this one isn't really market news, but it's a piece of meta that I think is interesting. When CCP Lilu released the CSM information, she also noted that the CSM white paper has been edited. And this is usually a boondoggle, in my opinion. The CSM white paper is kind of this thing that the CSM likes to chortle on about fixing because something they're not able to be effective because of the white paper and something. And it got released, and there's some interesting information about technicalities like removing inactives and how the re-election procedure works if a CSM is removed or dropped or resigns. But there's also a little tidbit that is causing a whole lot of trouble on the social spheres about who is actually qualified to run for CSM around CCP's quote-unquote strategic partners. And this has a lot of the news sites like Crossing Zebras, Eve News 24, and thematani.com justifiably in a tizzy about, are our writers disqualified? Are our editors disqualified? Are the board members who keep the websites up, are they disqualified? So that's going to be extremely interesting in the upcoming weeks. The people to watch definitely very closely are Sion Kumitomo and Bob Mon are the two most likely to be flying too close to this issue, and they're the two that will decide the actual outcomes. So I spent a lot of time on this. It's just that I feel passionately about it. It's really interesting to watch what's going on, and the most important thing is to be an informed voter. So once, I believe the first week in February, we're going to have a voting ticket like we had last year, where we're going to endorse 3 to 6 candidates that I believe embody the sort of meta that make this show possible, and I believe that you, the audience, will be interested in. And we're going to try and get a bunch of those on the Market Maker interviews as well, so keep tuned for that. And with that, now that we've got through all the news worth printing, let's move on to PLEX. So I said both in the 2015 review on the blog and in last week's show that 1.15 PLEX was the bottom of this particular swing, and you should have been buying in before the markets rise. Now that we're just slightly over 1.15 billion, I don't think that the party's over. I just think that the windows are closing. The sort of prediction, the sort of hand-wavy prediction I want to put out there for PLEX is hopefully a target of 1.3 billion for the Citadel release. But again, I'll need to run through the metrics and the numbers a little bit more. We could end up staying under the 1.2 mark. Otherwise, depending on release schedules and the cadence, and if Citadels get bumped into the summer instead of releasing in the spring like we were originally promised. Looking at the one-year view, again, things look relatively stable. We're seeing, again, a similar pattern to last year, where we came down during Christmas and we bounced back up in January, and we're seeing that sort of play on repeat here. This is why I'm a little hesitant to put a prediction out. We saw last year a huge flat space during quarter 1 and quarter 2. This was due to a lot of PLEX sales out of game, a lot of downward pressure coming from CCP, and generally kind of a wait-and-see attitude. I think that the player base right now is far more active. We're going to talk about what looks like some beating of war drums again in some of the ship markets. I don't really want to say that we're going to stay stable, and I really do believe that we can hit 1.3 for Citadel. I don't really want to go predict above that, because I think there's going to be some other factors that make that not really work, but until CCP really starts up the media engine with the new 07 season, it's going to be a little bit hard to lock predictions in until then. Moving on to RMT tokens, we've been watching for the last few weeks as multiple pilot training certificates had been lagging PLEX prices, and it looks like we're back in track with those. If you were able to go get a decent buy-in price, now would be a great time to sell out in a short term. But again, I wouldn't be in a rush to sell off my MPTCs, since they should track PLEX, and if we're expecting a positive outlook for PLEX, we're expecting a similarly positive outlook for multiple pilot training certificates. The interesting one, though, is the resculpt certificates continue to stay weak. We've always seen them when it comes to PLEX, when you talk about RM parity, being weak against PLEX, but over the Frostline event, it looks like there may have been enough dropping to really cripple the market. And I really don't think it's a very popular item, but just as a bellwether for RM translation, I like to keep it in the in here so that we can know, oh well, it's actually not worth the RM it takes to make them still. Next, if we look at the buy and sell spreads, in JITA, again, there was some weird behavior where there were a lot of buy orders during Christmas, and things have settled down. We're still seeing a pretty healthy, steady supply, and demand has been diminishing. So it looks like those cheap PLEX buy orders are drying up, and people are being more conservative with their buy orders as the price starts to rise. I'd like to pull this for a longer period of time so we can see, like, we saw this other buy order spike ahead of the Crimson Harvest, but I think that was anticipation for the price to come crashing down. So I really want to do more analysis on this particular graph. And then looking at the other regions, again, Minmatar is back. I'm sorry, guy on YouTube. Did not mean to break it. We're seeing things stay relatively stable between all of the hubs. We saw some instability over the fall in Amar, where prices were dipping much higher and much lower than the going trend, but we've seen that particular trend smooth out with Dodixie replacing its space for the unstable market. So keep an eye on that if you're looking into cross-market arbitrage. Moving on to minerals, Tritanium is it's going to be a pretty quiet week for a lot of minerals. Tritanium is staying relatively flat. We're seeing volumes stay where they are, and we're seeing prices bounce around the 6.3 mark. Again, I sort of expect a slight upward pressure into Citadel, but that could very well be met one for one with mining supplies, so we may not see it rise much above this 6.3 mark. Pyrite, again, is staying stable around 11.2. I did expect last week for the price to fall down to 11 even, but it looks like that downward pressure has subsided. We're seeing volumes tick up ever so slightly, so we may be seeing some of the floor there at 11.2. Again, what I believe in Tritanium, I believe in Pyrite, and I think that we're going to see slight upward pressure towards 11.5, but that's a weak prediction, and I'm not sure if we'll actually see it for Citadels or if miners will meet demand at the rate producers ramp up. Mexilon is our bellwether for capitals and heavy industry, and we're seeing a resurgence in volume in the last few days. The prices are ticking up ever so slightly, but if we go take a zoom in look, we're seeing supply ticking up slightly, not a ton, but enough, and prices are still staying relatively stable, but buy orders seem to be tracking up as well. So as demand ramps up, I sort of expect this to rise. I have a hard time predicting coming out of this 60 per unit lock we've been at for the last month. Maybe get up above to 65-ish. I don't, it's kind of a tentative prediction. I don't think capital producers are going to need that much. I don't think they're going to be surprised when Citadels hit, but that being said, it looks like there is some slight demand, so if you wanted to do a long-term 3-month speculation, Mexilon's not a bad place to park your money. Isogen is tracking downwards, and again, I believe this is due to increased Amber counts. Not so much that Amber yields more Isogen, but that since Amber is worth more ISK per hour, we're seeing more Amber mined, which means more Isogen hitting the market, which means the price is going to keep falling. I kind of expected 110 to be the floor here. We saw a pretty strong signal here on the RSI indicating that 110 was an unstable price, but we're still tracking down. 105 again looks like a floor, but we could very well slide below that and head towards 100. I have a hard time believing the price is going to slide much more below 100. I sort of expected the amount of time that Fozzie's change was out there, with that change to Isogen and Amber, for as long as it's been out there, I sort of expected this to already be done with, rather than continuing going at this point. But we might just be seeing the rotation of high-sec miners instead. Noxium again is showing a downward trend at 470. We saw it bounce up very briefly above up to 475, but I still believe this one has a slight downward trend. I'm not sure exactly where the floor is, but I do expect it to be oversupplied from nullsec. It's as we get higher in the value, as we move up the value chain of these minerals, we're going to see that the frontiers are going to outstrip demand from producers. It's very easy to export these high-value minerals, and though they are needed in strong quantities, I don't believe that, I still believe that we're in oversupply. Until we actually see the new capitals drop and citadels actually get out there, do I think the trend will reverse. But even with Noxium, I have a hard time believing we're going to go back up to the 500 point anytime soon. Zydrine, again, I've been picking on Zydrine for months, if you guys have been watching the show, and we saw it hit the bottom at 900 and start tracking back up at 950. If we do a zoom in look, looks like the price is getting propped up, but we're not seeing the supply and demand really move. We were seeing the supply higher while the price fell, and yes, we're in a little bit of an anemic supply, but I don't think that we are tracking that much lower. At a price of about 1K per unit, I still think it's a little bit overvalued. I think the 900 is the target to look for in the next 3 months, but we may see it stabilize at this 1K mark where people will prioritize new mining or move their or hoard the stuff waiting for the price to come back up. Megasite, again, we're seeing a similar trend. It bumped up against 1,000 and it's tracking up to 1,100. Same story as Zydrine. I think that we see an oversupply. We saw a lot of demand during the holidays, and that's starting to wane a little bit. This is to be expected. 1,100, I don't hate that as a price. I think 1,000 is more the stable floor, but we'll see in the upcoming weeks. And then last, this one is interesting in my opinion because I expect the volatility to run positive, is that Morphite is currently at 11K, but is trending towards 11.5. We're going to see a lot of trends in the Tech 2 ship market that have me thinking that Morphite's going to be on the rise, because I think we're going to want more and more volume. If we look at the zoom in, we're really starting to see a crunch in supply. And I think this is going to be indicative of a decent price increase. There's also some extra heat in the demand, and again, I think this is savvy investors seeing that war is on the horizon. Not sure who's fighting who yet, but we'll see when we get to the ship part of the show that there is a lot of action going on in the Tech 2 ship markets. And then last, just to look to see all of the minerals against each other. Again, we're seeing that downward trend in Isogen, the leveling off in Megasite and Zydrine, the even if slightly downward of Pyrite and Tritanium, and the downward trend of Noxium, even though it bounced off its particular floor. Moving on to fuel markets, again, this one is going to be particularly interesting. We saw in last week's show that nitrogen isotopes are on a tear. They have been at 850 for months against my prediction, constantly against my prediction, and they suddenly went on a tear up to 900, and everything else is staying relatively stable. We're seeing slightly positive pressure taking us off the 700 floor we've been at since the summer, and trending up towards a 750 floor on all the other isotopes. But the price of nitrogen continues to go crazy, And again, we just as we expect, the price of fuel blocks tracks the price of isotopes. Again, the prices are very high on Caldari fuel blocks. This is to be expected, but I still think the prices are a bit far and away. And if we zoom in on the nitrogen isotope market, what we're seeing is a prolonged shortage in the cell volume. And if I may put on tinfoil hat for a moment, I think Imperium and their pets are realizing that with the demand for Caldari isotopes, all they have to do is sit on their nullsec supply to keep the prices moving up. Is that as long as they restrict the as long as they restrict the nullsec supply, high-sec can't keep up. And this particular shortage, I think, has more going on than just that. I think that the Imperium trying to keep the lid on their isotopes is just sort of a savvy business move on their part rather than a major market manipulation. The thing that has me baffled is with the new expedition frigate that is specifically designed for covert ice mining, that we're not seeing these shortages get turned around by ninja miners. This would be a great chance, if you were so inclined, to go and steal the stuff from these nullsec and lowsec places where you can jump in, get a quick few cycles of the stuff, jump out, just like you would for high-end ore. I'm sure that the actual value yield is nowhere close to enough to really incentivize that yet. We may have to break 1,000 per unit to really get there. But this has me intrigued that we're seeing such a shortage, and we're not seeing people coming rushing to the market to exploit that shortage. And again, if we look at the other markets, we've been seeing the price tracking up ahead of this in the Amar and Galente markets. But this recent spike is particularly hot. And that's to be kind of expected, since these would have to be shipped in from Caldari space, and so I don't expect the actual volume sold in non-Caldari space to be that high. Moving on to our outliers. We're going to start where we always do, with advanced materials. Again, things are looking interesting. We're seeing fulleриdes tracking up, but phenolic composites tracking down. We're still seeing phenolic composites at a very healthy price, even if they are losing a bit of momentum. Also, some of the carbides are looking pretty healthy. We're seeing crystalline carbonide over 200, tungsten carbide tracking to 150. Titanium's a little thin on the ground, but and also siluramic fibers are pretty strong at the moment at around 250. Things are looking kind of up. We're seeing strength in the bottom, the same volatility we always see on the top, and sort of a weakness in the middle, which is odd in my opinion. I have a hard time telling you exactly what's going on with that. Usually I expect the highs to lead the mids to lead the lows, rather than the lows driving everything. So this is a little bit weird. But it's definitely not a bad time to be a reactor, especially if you are doing things like siluramic fibers or fulleриdes or phenolic composites. Moving on to our darling, the one we're going to be talking about until Citadels come out, PI grade 4s. So I brought these up, and I do need to go build a new visualization for you guys so we can actually talk about these, which ones are in oversupply, which ones are in shortage, and how we can put those all together to build a better picture for you. But again, I expect these to be in short supply. I think that a lot of producers are underestimating how many PI4s they really need, and the prices I expect to track up. Now, if you've been a fan in our chat channel on Prosper in the Tweet Fleet Slack, sorry, let me try that again. If you have been paying attention to our Prosper channel in the Tweet Fleet Slack, we've been talking a lot about this, and though I am hesitant to jump in on the JITA market, unless you can get some really banging buy orders going on, the really interesting work here is to go and pick up remote orders at either the alternate hubs or in low-sec hubs or in high-sec bridge hubs where places like Valor, where these orders might be going up for people who don't really want to ship them and just want to get their money out, or PvPers who manage to gank a Tiara or whatever. And those are going to be the places, if you want to start stockpiling, is to start getting creative on the fringes. I know I'm ruining somebody's method with that, but I think that we're going to see more than enough demand, and I really do believe that the general public does not understand what the actual demand for these are. The other thing, and I wasn't able to build a visualization ahead of the show, was all of the other tides are starting to rise in the PI market. So if you liked PI and you weren't making enough money per click, now might be a decent time to turn those planets back on. Also, if you are PvP oriented, I'd want to hold every low-sec, barren, and temperate planet within one jump freighter jump from JITA. Those, I think, are going to be real money makers if you can get your hands on them and put something like a 4 or 5% tax on them, or maybe even just a little bit less so that you entice people to use them. I think there's going to be a really great opportunity for a lot of people to make a lot of money, and not just in the obvious first speculation market, but in PI production, in POCO, in POCO ownership. The volumes that need to be produced are nowhere close today to what they need to be when Citadel hits, is basically the way I'm predicting this. And like I said, I'm going to see if I can get some time this weekend or next weekend to build a better visualization so we can talk about exactly how the tides are rising and actually show you guys what's important, and whether for instance, that self-harmonizing power cores haven't moved by much, if that's expected or unexpected. We'll talk about that more once I can build a better visualization. Next, moving on to ships. I know this doesn't look like much, but interceptors are showing some interesting signals with the latest release. We're seeing the Claw, the Malediction, and the Tyrannus ticking up. And these are all standardized to price. They're all standardized to the same axis on price. And the ticks, the upticks are very interesting, especially that buy orders are following the upticks so closely. I expect something decently large going on in nullsec in the upcoming 6 weeks. I'm not sure who is gearing up, but there is a lot more action going on in the Tech 2 ship market than we have seen over the entire fall. Bombers are also showing heat. We see the Manticore was spiking right ahead of the release. Purifier's not far behind it. Even the Nemesis and the Hound have just started tracking up. This is a great chance for T2 producers to get into the market. I'm not sure. I'm sort of tracking a target price of 30 mil if you wanted to get really ambitious, but I do expect a lot more demand in the current upcoming meta. Assault frigates are also showing some healthy movement, and again, I forgot to standardize this one so they were all the same price, but we're seeing upticks in the Wolf and in the Enyo. Well, the Enyo spiked and then came back down, and the Retribution is tracking up. We're seeing a lot of heat in the small ship metas. I know I should have the new T3 destroyers and the new logistic frigates, but I don't have enough data on those yet to show you guys. But when we do, those will get added to this view as well. Moving outside of the small ships, we saw a huge buyout of Hurricane fleet issues, bringing us from an average of about 50 sold per day up to about 250 sold in just a day. I don't know. Again, this rise is probably over with by the time the show airs, but it's interesting to see the heat come into this market that has been relatively stable since the rebalance announced in the fall, that released in the fall. They have been popular. They've got a little bit more life in them, but the recent large restocking is very, very interesting. Moving on to the Arguer Navy issue, we saw a big spike a few weeks back when we were seeing everything from from the Amar Faction Warfare team spiking up. Then we saw it crash as people were cashing out and getting greedy, and then we've seen it bump back up again. I don't expect this particular high point to remain, just because I don't think that there's enough demand to really sustain it. But it's a very interesting, again, to see what usually is just a one hump thing where we see it go high and then the market finally catches up and it crashes back down and it stays low until a new cash out comes. The Arguer is bouncing back again, which is interesting. Damnation is showing a similar pattern. We saw a spike back at the start of December, and I don't even think I said Damnation. Okay. We're seeing a similar pattern on the Damnation, where we saw a lot of heat at the start of December. Even though this was... Yeah, we saw a lot of heat at the start of December. We saw it wane. We've seen another large buyout just a few days ago, and the price is tracking up to what is probably 350 million. I expect this to come back down off its peak, but there's somebody out there who needs these in reasonably large volumes. So if you're a producer, I'd look to hold on to maybe 10 to try and catch another peak coming up. It doesn't look like armor doctrines are going to be really popular. I would actually rather bet on the shield doctrine ships, things like the Sleipnir and everything else in the shield metas, but the Damnation is tracking high. Next, we're going to move on to modules. I know I mentioned last week that it looks like Caldari Navy was going to have a great chance to cash out LP. The prices spiked, but they didn't drop back down yet to where I expected. I expected the prices to come back down to this 100 million range pretty quickly, that for this rise to come up, I'd expect oversupply to just tank it pretty soon. So the prices are still high. If you were holding out on Caldari Faction Warfare loyalty points, now is an excellent time to be cashing them out. Tides seem to be high at the moment, but I don't know if this particular trend will last through the weekend. And if we look at Caldari Navy invul fields, again, we're seeing another huge spike in price. Like, we're seeing a huge shortage, and this just doesn't make sense, since I expect Caldari Faction Warfare loyalty points to be the most supplied out there in the market. So if you have them, this is a great chance to spend them. Everything is looking very high at the moment. Another interesting one, and I almost didn't highlight this, was the Tengu Gravitational Capacitor. We've seen the price stay very stable for several months, and then a large buyout of about 100 in a day, rather than the normal 20-ish, moving the market way up. This is, again, interesting. This would be indicative of perhaps Slippery Pete's coming back. I'm not sure if the gravity capacitor is really no, it should be the tool of choice for your Slippery Pete, but again, feel free to correct me in the comments below. the sudden interest in the Tengu is interesting, and I didn't highlight all of the T3 ships together this time, but we'll keep a look on them for next week and definitely bring up all of the T3 information, at least in the prediction review. And then I believe this is the last module, Covert Jump Portal Generators. This is for Black Ops ships. Are very popular at the moment. I don't know if this is because of Chance Ravine, Wingspan TT's Going South series, which I frickin' love, by the way, so good job, Chance. And the Black Ops seem to be popular as ever, so the market is tracking high. Again, I don't know if there's any chance for speculators to get in here, but it'd be a decent chance to cash out some builds, try to move about 20 to 40 of them perhaps. I'm not sure how much the market can really sustain in the short term. As we can see by the chopped off bars, it's a very erratic market, but looks like it's prone to shortage. So if you're willing to jump in there, you might actually be able to make a pretty buck. And on to the last section, our prediction review. I went ahead and dropped the Gecko out of our analysis. If you really want to see the Gecko back week over week, feel free to leave a comment begging for it back. Instead, we're going to look at Quaff Zero. It was dropping out of every Frostline drop, every Frostline site during the event, which ended, I believe, with the point release, either at the point release or the week before the point release. I have a hard time hunting down exactly when the Frostline sites dried up. But we can see right as soon as the sites dry up, the price has been tracking back upwards. For everyone who is hoping to hoard this to sell out at 20 million to basically double your money, I think it's going to take a while to get there. I think we're going to get steady at 15 to 16 million. Not a bad place to sell off again in the meantime, but I have a hard time believing that we're going to see consumption rise so high that we're going to come screaming over the 20 million mark, maybe hitting 25 and then coming back down to 20. I think there's just too much of this stuff out in the market for it to climb much above 16 million in the next 2 to 3 months. After Citadels, though, we might actually see it climb back up, but we'll definitely be keeping an eye on this. Again, if we look at the zoom in on the buy and sell market, again, we're seeing very high buy order volumes, but pretty even sell order volumes, which is why I don't think the price is going to climb much higher. I think this is mostly speculative, and I don't think there's enough. I don't think there was enough instilled demand to consume it yet. And again, I mean, this is pretty telling. We saw almost no volume, like 10 or 15 sold a day, maybe 50. And then an explosion in volume, where we're selling 4,000 a day. So the volumes moving around, I think, are traders washing each other's hands more than people actually buying it to use it at the moment. And that does it for this week's show. Again, I've been your host, Lockefox, and I want to thank everybody who tuned in live tonight on Twitch and YouTube. It really does mean a lot to broadcast to all you guys. If you want to catch the show, all you got to remember is Eve Prosper. That'll get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and the blog. If you want to interact with us off the air, the best place to do so is on the Tweet Fleet Slack. Information on how to join will be in the channel info below. I want to thank everybody who supports us on Patreon. We try not to run ads on any of our content, and the patrons keep this show on the air. Again, if you want to support us directly, see us at patreon.com/EveProsper. With that, I just have one more quick announcement that, again, if you want to tune in live next week, we're moving the time back from 0300 Friday to 0100 Friday, just a 2-hour earlier stream. This is just a 1-week thing. If there's any other changes, be sure to tune in on Twitter. Once again, thank you everyone for tuning in. I've been your host, Lockefox, and I will see you all next week on the Eve Prosper Market Show.